Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here today. I'm Jade, and I'm excited to share with some important macroeconomic insights with you, particularly how they influence our strategic planning at Singapore Airlines. Let's begin with the fundamentals. First, we have GDP, inflation, and unemployment. There are three macroeconomic measures. First of all, GDP or domestic product reflects the overall economic output. When the GDP rises, disposable income typically increases, translating into higher demand for travel. This means more passengers and more cargo and better financial outcome for Singapore Airlines. Secondly, inflation is a double-edged word. Moderate inflation signal healthy economic activity, but high inflations drive up our costs, food, staff wages, and maintenance. It also squeezes consumers' budgets, impacting ticket demand. Thirdly, we have unemployment offers another signal. High unemployment reduces discretionary spending, including travel. Conversely, during periods of low unemployment, like economic expansions, we often see an uptick in flight booking and business travel. For the business cycle, in time of economic expansions, we usually observe an increase in GDP and a decrease in employment, often paired with a moderate inflations. This atmosphere stimulates travel for both leisure and business purposes. So during a recession, GDP screens, unemployment rises, and inflation generally slow down. In these periods, consumers tend to reduce their travel, necessitating our agility, optimizing fleet usage, adjusting routes, and ensuring operational efficiency. So, keeping an eye close on where we stand in the business cycle is essential for a Singapore airline to make well informed decisions regarding resource allocations, pricing strategies, and partnership development. So, what are the tariffs? Tariffs are, in a sense, taxes imposed on goods that are imported or exported. US tariff on export from Singapore increased prices within the United States. As the price rise, the demand for Singaporean goods will decline. Tariff impacts and the trade tension. The U.S. recent news reports indicate that the U.S. had implemented a 10% tariff on Singaporean good exports. These tariffs increased export prices, leading to a decrease in demand from the consumers in the U.S. So, as a result, trade volume decline and supply chains face disruption. Tariff graphically. So, tariff take a closer look at how tariff impact international trade using this demand and supply diagram. Under free trade conditions, the world price is set at $100. That's at the baseline, but marked as a WPW. At this price, domestic consumers demand a large quantity, shows as QW, but the domestic producer only supply up to the quantity demand one. The difference between work quantity and quantity demand one is made up by the imports. This is great for consumers who benefit from lower price, and it also supports higher trade volumes. This is where Singapore Airlines benefits. Increased cargo shipments, strong demand for logistic and steady business travel between trading nations. However, once a tariff is imposed, the price of the imported goods prices to $110, marked here at the price with the tariff. So as a result, domestic producer increase supply to quantity demand to consumers reduce to their demand to quantity with tariff. So overall, imports shrink to the narrower gap between quantity with the tariff and the quantity demand too. So this means less trade volume, and from our side, reduced air cargo traffic and fewer business travelers involved in the international trade. Especially important here is the green rectangle marked with a T represent tariff revenue collected by the government, but the yellow triangles A and B shows the deadweight loss. These are inefficiencies and missed opportunities due to reduced trade and consumptions. For Singapore Airlines, implications are clear. Tariff raise costs, reduce trade volume, and impact our freight and passenger segments. Impact on the trade between two nations. The trade volume between two nations decreases, leading to fewer shipments and lower revenue. Tariff can provoke retaliatory actions and reduce trade volumes. They create uncertainty in global supply chains, potentially disrupting aircraft parts and maintenance supply chains. Insight from the behavioral economic. So why do people make irrational choices? People don't always act rationally or in their best interest. They only choose immediate rewards over long gains, and heuristic habits and emotion often guided behavior. For behavioral versus traditional economic, people are rational decision makers, make choices to maximize utility, and have full information for and foresight. Unlike to the traditional behavioral economic, people are influenced by bias and emotions, make predictably irrational choices, operate under time pressures, and maintain mental shortcuts. Why do people choose unhealthy food? There are three key aspects over here. First, we have present bias. Immediate rewards, taste, convenience, and value more than the long-term health. Secondly, we have the status quo bias. People stick to the familiar routines even if change is better. Budget rationality. People have limited time, information, and decision making ability. For the AI and labor market inequality, we have two scenarios. First scenario, AI reduces inequality. We start at the initial demand curve where D1, where the initial demand curve, which is demand 1, D1, where the labor market is equivalent at point E1, and the wage level W1 and employment level Q1. Here, what's happened when AI is used to enhance, not replace human workers. It creates new efficiencies, supports existing roles, and drive innovation. So as a result, the demand for labor increases, shifting from demand curve from D1 to D2. This movement leads to a new equilibrium at E2, where both wages W2 and employment Q3 are higher. So in the transaction, there's a shortage of workers between Q1 and Q3 as the new technologies demand for skilled and digitally supported employees. For the second scenario, AI increases inequality. AI replaces certain jobs, especially in operations or customer service. This chart helps us to visualize that shift. On the vertical axis, we have wages of workers, and along the horizontal axis, the quantity of workers employed. We begin at the original demand curve D1, where the market is imbalanced at point E1 with a wage of W1 and employment level Q1. But then AI enters the scene, automating certain tasks, especially in routine or manual roles. As a result, demand for labor decreases, shifting the curve from D1 to D2. This shift causes a drop in wages to W2, a reduction in employment to Q3. It creates a labor surplus. As more workers are available than jobs required at original wage level. So come to conclusion, AI becomes a driver of inequality, but only if we allow it to be. By planning proactively, we can ensure that AI support our workers' transformations rather than fragment it. This is not just about technology adoption, it's about preserving our people, our culture, and our service excellence at Singapore Airlines. What to expect in the next 5 years? For Singapore Airlines, the path forward is clear. We must embrace AI responsibly, ensuring that innovation support our people, enhance productivity, and maintains inclusively, particularly in areas like predictive maintenance, personalized marketing, AI-powered customer services, chatbots, also with government partnership like Future Skills to support career transition. Thank you for listening. Have a good day.